Hi, and welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Brian Maddox, and I am joined today by Edmund Zaloga from Responsify. Welcome, Edmund.
How's it going?
Really well. I think our audience would love to hear a little bit more about how you get started and how Responsify came to be, and then we can dig into some of the more fun questions.
Sure. It's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Kind of a combination of a lot of the things that I love and I'm passionate about, and kind of constantly working on mastering. So, kind of early on, I was first and foremost kind of out there freelancing in the creative world in New York City. And so branding, website design, really communication design. Also got to be a part-time professor while I was doing that, and kind of sharpen and hone my skills at sort of graphic design, communication design. And so then over time, I decided I wanted to be a part of and build something sort of beyond my own, studio. And Responsify came to fruition really around, it's been 10 years now. So it's just the idea of how to help people, essentially transform the way that they're conducting business, and really helping companies that are more innovative, trying to use Responsify as a way to kind of propel, businesses that are doing good, and helping to advance the world and people and society. So that's where we got to start. And it was mostly a lot, like I said, branding, website design, and then kind of morphed into, found out and fell in love with HubSpot. And at the time had been deep in sales and business development, boot camps and training myself. And then just really kind of stumbled upon what I think is such a critical thing that I think a lot of people and companies struggle with. So that made it more exciting to problem solve for, which is content. Ultimately we're human beings. We like people and companies have websites. We all have something to give to the world. The website sort of, is meant to represent that and to ultimately, help connect people. And what I found was, after interviewing a lot of great CEOs that I had just hounded and tried to really get a hold of, they sort of told me the same thing, which is like, hey, we have a website. We've got this really innovative product or service. We're having a hard time getting people to even find us. We're getting a hard time people even recognize us, and we've got the best thing ever, but nobody knows about it. So that's when I started putting two and two together, and I realized, okay, that really the opportunity is, I started to look at websites as brochures, and thinking about, like, you're coming from the print world, having a lot of those analogies on hand. The idea is that you're presenting yourself in a very consolidated way on a website, and that's great. And so that's always something that can be polished. It became harder in terms of business wise. A lot of tools came out. A lot of people looking to do websites cheaply. But the thing that we kept stumbling upon was that content, in order to bridge the gap between what their customers' pains are, what they're going through, and what our clients' solutions offered, helping to match make those two things and bridge the gap, form relationships and connections, so that essentially we're creating natural attraction between the two, so that marketing, given its infamous history at sort of destroying things, it was an opportunity to kind of look at marketing from a different perspective, and it's almost non-marketing. It's more just about sort of relationship building and creating a lot of educational, informative content for people. So I consider it a form of marketing, but I think it's something that's very well received, and that our clients, end users, their prospects, really enjoy and I think find value in it. It just helps build a lot of trust and a lot of value. So that's sort of like sort of the quickest overview of how we got founded. And now, 10 years in, we are much heavier into content. And then so that's sort of the front end, was finding out, like, what is the problems that people need help with, and then what kind of services can we provide to help them with that. And oftentimes they weren't, even when they're not aware of that problem, we had to help learn how to educate people about taking these approaches. And then on the back end of it, we then decided, okay, so to do this thing, which is creating a lot of content and beautiful websites and all those moving parts, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of different moving parts. And how do you do this in an efficient way that is both productive for the the goal at hand, and that we were kind of eliminating roadblocks along the way. And so it was very challenging. I feel like, well, like any agency, we've sort of tried almost everything, project management tools, different, types of procedures and documentation. And finally, I would say it's probably about 5 years ago, halfway through our journey here, decided we needed to take it to the next level and to improve our whole client experience as well as our operation. We developed our own app. Basically, it's a web app, and currently it's client facing. At some point, we might release it to the public. And it really is just a matter of helping to kind of streamline and quality control all the different important details that have to be looked at and measured along the way, so that the end product, if for instance, if we're creating a blog post, there's at least 12 different steps involved. There's different 5 or 6 different individuals that are sort of plugged in at different areas along that workflow. And then by the end of it, we get to the point where I think we had about 2,000 articles, for instance, last year that we put together. I think we had two times a client had said, "Hey, we want this completely rewritten." So it's basically batting 1,000. It's one out of 1,000 are being asked to be rewritten. So we're trying to get it down to a science, and that's been our mission, is on the back end. How do we make the process of creating content more fun, more productive, making sure there's really accountability? It's a thing that I try not to talk too much about, but it is probably the elephant in the room, is that how do we make sure that both we're able to hold ourselves accountable and our clients accountable, the things that need to be done in a certain time frame, if they want deliverables to be done in a certain time frame. So that's what we've sort of built out as our own solution. And then now we have this great platform that allows us to consistently innovate and come up with new features that help consistently make the experience better for clients, but also make sure that the quality of the content and the way that it's being created and the voice of each client is being taken into account. All these different variables are top of mind through the process, through many people in the process.
So as an outsource sort of content creation marketing function, one of the things I'm sure you experience all the time is your clients asking for content that may or may not actually move their business forward.
Yeah.
If it doesn't move the needle, then what's the point? How often does that happen? And what's the consultative process you go through? And then B, as a follow-up question, how do you help them get through that transition?
So I think a lot of that comes down to when you don't, if you don't have a goal, it's difficult to score, right? So the way we look at it, or maybe the way that I've forced everybody to look at it, is, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. And so most clients, when they're flying by the seat of their pants and they're coming up with a new idea of the day, it's generally, now that I can sort of say 10 years in, I've seen the pattern. It's generally when there isn't a solid research and development done and a strategy put together that sort of sets the roadmap of what needs to be done. Now, of course, occasionally it's something like COVID, sometimes there's a wrench thrown in the mix and you need to think about that. The way we structure it is that we really nail down, we spend a lot more time up front, making sure that we have clearly very evergreen paths of content that we need to build out. And then that becomes sort of like the standard services, is that we're doing a campaign per quarter and it's focusing on a specific topic. And we're not getting distracted by the shiny objects. We're just really focusing in on how do we cover that topic so thoroughly that we're like done with that topic, that the client then has really a good library. It's a dozen blog articles oftentimes and an ebook or some kind of calculator. and it thoroughly covers it so that it, from a topic cluster standpoint, Google can recognize it as you're not just shooting in the dark and just throwing things at keywords and into articles. You're actually really covering ground on different topics. And so that's how the approach we've taken probably the majority of our existence here. And it's paid off because it also helps, like I said, it creates a lot more credibility in both Google's algorithm, but also then more opportunities for people to stumble upon content within those campaigns. So then we look at it from a logistical standpoint. If a client's like, hey, we need this one-off thing, then it depends on what it is. Sometimes if it's a simple thing, we just throw it in. Especially if we know that the client isn't constantly requesting things. If it's a client, which we're all human beings, we all have different personalities. Sometimes clients are more, their expectation is that you're going to do everything forever, endlessly, without any boundaries. And so that's where those clients will typically set better expectations and say, okay, here's where we're at, and anything that we do outside of that would be, an additional change order, and we can do that. It'll take X number of hours. And then I think having that earlier on when I was sort of freelancing, that was it's a conversation you're nervous to have with a client because you want to keep the client, but in reality, it's like anything in life. If you're not being honest with yourself, and you can't be honest with the person you're having a relationship with, in this case, the client, you're going to create your own resentment because now you're doing work you're not getting paid for. And
you don't have a relationship at all.
Yeah, exactly. The relationship really is not there. And so for us, it's like, for me, I'd rather be blunt and honest and occasionally lose a client who is over demanding and unrealistic. And we lay it all out in black and white. Here's exactly what we're going to do. Here's how much of it we're going to do. Here's how much time it's going to take. And so when they're asking for things that are outside of that, I'll oftentimes say, well, let's go back to totally understand and respect, and then let's go back to the agreement. Let's look at what we have. And so that's helpful for the people who are, fair and reasonable. And then there's always going to be clients who are not. And so that's just, I guess, as you realize, as I think about businesses in general, the older I get, I start to realize anytime you're interfacing any service, any human, any service that involves a human being, you're going to deal with some of that no matter what. So you instead of being angry about it, just recognize that's the nature of that type of business. And, you trade one thing for another. For me, it's if, 9 out of our 10 clients, which is the case almost always, are like really fun to work with, really respect us. We actually, naturally our team works a little harder for those clients because we know that it's recognized, and that at the end of the day, we're working towards helping, their goal. And then it's a mutual beneficial thing. So things like even in our platform, if you're probably all used to like looking at Google, you leave a comment on a bit of text. So we took that comment feature and built it into something on steroids where it's like, okay, you're going to leave a comment. Cool. What type of comment is it, so that our system knows, is this like an appreciation that you want to show? Hey, I like this. Or is it, here's a grammar issue, or here's some other kind of issue. And we've just found that some clients are now starting to like naturally blend in some appreciation comments, which I think it builds the culture, right? That's what it's, if our writers don't feel like they're being appreciated, and the whole thing is reliant on relationships and how people treat each other, right? So, so that's kind of one. Those are the types of things that I'm always thinking about as we're designing tech features, but it's really about like the human experience and how people feel about it and how they're going to react to it.
Yeah, I mean, and you raise an important point. The expectation setting side of that conversation all the way through actually helps the relationship, doesn't hurt it. I think it strengthens that as you go. At least that's been my experience. With
9 out of 10 people.
Yeah, I mean, well, people are hiring you for your expertise, and your expertise is really got to fall back to a process of some sort. Right. So that interaction's got to be scripted and structured to allow for those environments to emerge where you get that appreciation and mutual relationship.
Yeah, I think the way I would create two buckets. Is that there, and it's this I do believe is from sort of is set at that, as you know, they say that, you know, crap runs downhill. You know, basically, if the organization is from the culturally from the top, you know, treats each other well and supports each other, then they fall into the category of a client that sees us as a partner, where we actually are working together towards something, and that we can have honest conversations, and sometimes not agree on things. I mean, it's like a marriage, right? You're you're not going to agree on everything, but the things that matter, you work out, and you're in it to win it. And then so that's one bucket. I would say clients that can see us as a partner, and then they're more, you know, more easy to work with and more fun to work with. Then the other bucket I would say would be like people who see us as a vendor. And that word always kills me, because it's like, I'm not, you know, like I think of like, am I like, you're not choosing between potato chips and pretzels. You're working with a group of human beings that are going to intimately figure out what's going on with your company and what you're doing and how are we going to help you. It's a team thing. And so
Right.
vendors, I think, I get it from a supply. So if you're buying pencils, but not, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, B2B services. So
Right.
that's where I think then that's where we kind of early on figure out, okay, what's this client? How do they think? How do they see us? And then the other thing I think is at some point, you know, right now we're just focused on like keeping our agency thriving and growing in that direction. And so we built this amazing software and platform to fulfill that and to make that more and more a reality. And then on the flip side of it, which is oftentimes how software as a service companies are created, we can then probably take that software and build it, you know, restructure it in a way where it can then be a like an enterprise solution, and or create a service where people can just, like a vending machine, they can kind of go there like an Upwork, but with more quality control and more project management built into it, specifically around creating content. So these are different avenues we're exploring in terms of how do we, in addition to what we're building, you know, for 10 years in Responsify, how do we branch that off and also potentially help people who are, and a lot of times it's startups, right? So they're usually very green. They're usually very young. They're going to tackle the entire world, and they're going to do it all themselves, which is, we know, is not possible within 24 hours in a day. And so oftentimes they just want, like, I want X number of blog posts, and these are the topics I want to cover. So they already think that they got it. And so that's where I think things like Fiverr and Upwork have been doing really well, is that people can kind of transactionally get what they need. We've been focusing in on more of the clientele who have tried a lot of those things on their own, and they're realizing, okay, you know, we're wasting time and money trying to do it on our own and sort of, you know, and not getting the best results. How do we work with somebody who's going to help us make it, you know, do this better, faster, and cheaper than we could do on our own? And that's the sort of golden. They say it's a utopia. I say, you know, it's somewhere in between. It might not be, you know. For every case, you know, people could definitely try to do things cheaper than us, but, you know, there's always that compromise, the quality, and then it's going to take longer. You're going to have to deal with the headaches of managing all those freelancers. And so we're just sort of trying to find the sweet spot so that people can, clients can get an amazing value and, you know, really, and it's fun at the end of the day when you're seeing, like, you know, again, we do a lot of stuff through HubSpot and other CRMs that have analytics. You know, we're getting notifications throughout the day, like, so-and-so just downloaded this ebook, so-and-so just visited this page. It's fun because it's, at that point, it's like you're creating, it's gamifying like their marketing and sales process,
Yeah.
which makes it really fun.
You have a history, and the backstory you gave kind of earlier in the episode was from a real creative space. And as you've kind of embraced the sort of SEO nature and all of the kind of things that come out, I mean, it's quite clear that that's a data-driven sort of activity. How do you balance that creative sort of interest and background that you started with today's heavily data-driven approach to solving some of these problems?
So I think the way to do that, and I think it's, I think it's a matter of balancing art and science. I think people generally are either really good. You have to, there's another metaphor. It's like your head in the clouds or your feet on the ground. I think that we try to do both. Like that's the thing. Is like we're trying to. Luckily, I'm tall,
Sounds
so
like a long stretch.
I can kind of I've got some cloud cover, but it's the balance. So I think some people are so data driven. So I would say most SEO agencies look at it from a point of view of how do we technically get the keywords, get the things that are statistically ranking, and sort of jam them in the right places and kind of work it into. And so that's sort of like forcing it in a way. It does work. It does get you. I think the problem is then when people, human beings, and this is AI, which should probably open up a whole nother conversation, are involved in the creation of content. So humans are going to react to, there's the science of it, which is like, is it aligned with the keywords that they're typing in Google? And this is just the SEO portion of what we do. We actually cover many avenues, email marketing, as well as a little bit of social media in the B2B space, mostly on LinkedIn. But in terms of on the SEO piece, as you mentioned, it's the art and the science. So the science is, okay, first we reverse engineer who are these ideal customers of our new clients, typically when we first start. And we create personas, and everybody talks about personas. But I think the thing that people miss the most, because people look at personas mostly through the lens of personality. I think a lot of marketing agencies try to like capture like the how old they are and how much coffee they drink and these types of things that are cute, but aren't when you're in the B2B world, it's not what moves the needle, right? So we break it down, and I'm a big believer in frameworks. Business model generation book that came out a while back, sort of part of the startup framework scene, really changed the way that I thought about it in distilling. I love when things can be really distilled and be like a simple truth, right? So when you can help a client distill down a pain point, down, let's say their top 5 pain points that their customer with this job title faces. And then, those are like the challenges. And then, okay, what are their specific goals? And then, okay, what are their specific responsibilities? Those 3 sort of little snippets of information is perfect, is everything you need to create great content, because then that sends you down and it allows us to now empathize, as well as our clients, marketing and sales team, to say, let's look at this persona and try to understand what they're going through. Not like, how do we sell to them? What are the things that are going to make them buy? It's like, that's like the reverse way of thinking. I look at it the other way around, which is like, how is this person going to, how do we show them that we know them? How do we show them that we empathize with what they're going through, so that we then touch upon the right points? We find those points on Google. So if we're talking about the SEO point of it, which is, what words are they searching for that relate to these specific pain point topics? Then the art form comes in, which is when our strategists then like, okay, how do we craft? And AI is now, I think this is where AI can be a helpful part of this equation, is coming up with lots of ideas for how to create and generate headlines that sort of that specifically hit a point, right? Not just like randomly, like give me, 10 titles about X, but like, here's a specific pain point, here's a specific thing that's going on, here's what weird people, and then let's craft a title first and foremost that has meaning to the end audience, right? That they're gonna, whether they search for it online and it shows up on Google on page 1 or 2, and as they're flipping through, and it catches their eye because it's something that stands out and it's something they care about. That's door number 1. Door number 2 is we're sending out, we want that headline to resonate with that specific audience, that segment, so that when we're feeding it through email as a piece of content, like they're part of this free publication, they're getting this free content, that they look at it and go, oh, this isn't spammy at all. This isn't somebody trying to like sell me something. This is useful. I'm gonna stay enrolled in this. So for instance, when we do what we call like email publications for now 10 years, somewhere close to 50 clients total, We did some research a couple of years back. It's a lot of work, but we did it. I think it's safe enough to say that it's been the same. 97% or more, without like cold emailing people in these lists that are of a specific job title where we're feeding content that has been carefully crafted. 97% of them are happy or stay enrolled, and only less than 3% of them unenroll, unsubscribe. And so that's just, for me, first and foremost, like, of course, I want everybody to open and click on everything. But the reality is, do no harm is sort of the rule number one.
Right.
With emails is like, okay, so create the content, it lives on the website, it's set up for SEO success as best as it can based on the client's existing credibility. Like we're building on the shoulders of whoever came before us or worked with that company before us, so that they might have a domain authority of 10, which means that it's going to take them much, much longer to get ranked. Or they might have a domain authority of 30, 40, 50, and compared to their competitors, they can actually throw their weight around, and we can actually get them, some quicker results. So we try to take like a 3-pronged approach, or maybe cover all 3 bases, which is SEO and great content that people can find. It's easily accessible. Second base would be the email. Make sure we can distribute it out. So far, it's still kind of the Wild West with email marketing. Europe and Canada are obviously highly restricted in that sense. The USA is still sort of like anything goes for the most part, as long as you have an unsubscribe link. So that has been really successful for us because we're taking the right approach. And then the third thing is social media. Typically, we focus mostly on LinkedIn for clients, and it's just feeding their LinkedIn, company page, and sometimes individual salespeople and so forth, with content showing up in those feeds. And it just reinforces and strengthens those connections and those interactions.
So as we start to wrap up here, I think you've got the answer to this already, or a lot of folks have already kind of figured it out. But who should reach out to you, and how should they get a hold of you?
So our website, and no surprise there, responsify.com. And there's always a call to action, usually in the top right corner, to book a time to speak with us. First I want to just kind of give kudos to my team. Like all of this is sort of like smoke and mirrors. If you don't really have an amazing team and amazing technology in place. So that's what I'm most grateful for. And I think anybody who reaches out, first and foremost, we're a very approachable group. So anybody who really is just, even if they're in the position, and really in a B2B, first and foremost, where it's very challenging for them to consistently engage and educate their audience and build that audience. We're happy to just get on a call, first and foremost, just to sort of see like, hey, how's it going? Talk shop. What are some of the things you're doing? What's working? What's not? Is there an opportunity? Do you think this is something that might be helpful? And then we can kind of start to build that relationship if it makes sense. And oftentimes it does. So yeah. And just that we're there to do it, to help support them. I think that's the other thing, is sometimes marketing people, they're put in a position where they're, unrealistically, it's kind of a weird thing. I mean, somebody should write a whole book just on this topic. Maybe I will someday, and I can get some time back in my life. But like the marketing, it's just such a weird scenario where almost always their marketing staff is the most understaffed part of the company. Yet it can in reality be probably the most important and vital, beating heart of whether or not people are going to find out about that company, going to want to buy things from that company, and so on. And so it's just always amazing. So we just take a very careful approach and let marketers know, like, listen, we're not here to take your job. They feel very quickly threatened.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
I'm the only one here, and they haven't put any money into marketing, and I don't really have too much of a budget. It's like, okay, let's take a breath. I hear you. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Like, here's how we're going to work with your CEO and figure out what you need help with, the things that you're the best at, so that you can focus on those things to make the biggest impact on your company. And then how do we help support you and create this, do the heavy lifting stuff that has been weighing you down, that has been making it hard to make any progress because there's just too much for them to do. And it's just expected that they're going to do it all. Like that marketing people are just need to check every box, and it's just too much. So, what I've learned in life is just like, know what you're good at, always be willing to learn, and figure out how to assemble and work with the people who have strengths that you don't have. Like you should know a little bit about everything as a good leader. But you need to be able to put people together that work well together, that are all, in it to win it. And that each have strengths that combine together is sort of like a band of superheroes, And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. And that's how we want to sort of have our clients and the heads of marketing think about, like, we want to be your sidekick. We want to be your co-pilot here and help you with this. So that's been the fun part. When that goes right, it's a lot of fun. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I think now that we're sort of in this, what would you call it, through the first decade of Responsify, we're learning to adapt extremely quickly. Things like AI, I think people got a little overhyped it. I think it's absolutely going to completely change our entire world and in what we think about things. However, when it comes to like whether human beings are still working, I guess, as long as human beings are still working, we're still here to help make that a better experience for both the people doing the work and the clients who need those types of human services, specifically in that marketing segment. So yeah, so that's kind of the long and short of where we are and where we're going.
And you answer the question which I normally ask at the very end, which is, give the 3 big things you picked up along the way. So with that,
did I hit 3?
Yes, you did. It was on the money too. It was great. Okay, cool. So with that, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been awesome to hear about your experience. Definitely want to check back in with you as you grow and progress and see what else you can share in the next 10 years of Responsify.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have suggestions for future episodes or would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at brian@podcastchef.com. That's BRIAN at podcastchef.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your business to the next level.